A well. All over the world, people get water from millions of wells that work in the same way. First, a hole is dug down to several feet below the water table. Then, the hole is lined with stones or a tile pipe to keep the sand and soil and soft rock from crumbling into it. Water rises inside to the same height as the water table around the well, just as it did in the tin can in your experiment. The water is dipped out in buckets or pumped out with pumps, worked by hand or machine. This gives the people cool, fresh water from underground when they need it. The well keeps on supplying water as long as the water table is higher than the bottom of the well. When a well goes dry, it's because the water table has sunk down lower than the bottom of the well. This may happen in a dry season when not much rain has fallen to seep through into the water table. Or the water table may be lower because too much water has been used. Sometimes the well can be started again by digging the hole deeper in order to reach the lowered water table. High water table. Even if you don't see a dug well, you can tell that the water table is not far below the surface of the ground. Where the water table runs close to the surface, you will find good, well-watered land, pleasant with farms and orchards. You can look at a shimmering, moist green field and know that the underground water is gently wetting the plant roots. There are many places in the world where the water table is very close to the top. Let's see what happens then. Experiment. Do this. With your spoon, scoop out a bowl-shaped hole down to the water table in your jar. You will find that the water seeps in just enough to make the sand sopping wet. What you have done is to make a miniature swamp. Swampland. In the same way, when the water table is very high, water seeps into the surface earth and makes it sopping wet. Such a place is called a swamp. In a real swamp, of course, there's more than just sand. All sorts of water-loving plants grow there, and the soil is often spongy and mucky from the rotting leaves that fall from these plants. This is not good farmland, but often deep woods and brush surround a swamp, and many kinds of wild things find a home in swampland. Sometimes the water table is high and nearby land dips down. Can you guess what happens in places where the water table is higher than the land? You can find the answer in another experiment. Experiment. Do this. Dig down in the miniature swamp you just finished. Scoop out the sand until the bottom of the hole is 2 or 3 inches below the water table. You will find that the water seeps in and forms a miniature lake. Many lakes are formed in hollows that are lower than the water table. This is a different way of forming a lake from the one you read about earlier. In a lake formed by a river, you remember, the water flows through a bowl-shaped piece of land. In a lake made by the water table, the underground water seeps into the bowl-shaped hollow and fills it. Both kinds of lakes are good for fish and fun. Low water table. Sometimes the water table runs somewhat deeper below the surface soil. It runs high enough to keep the grasses growing, but it is too far down for lush field or forest things. Water does not seep up to the plants above as generously as it does in good farmland. Here there may be grazing land and widespread ranches. Often the cattlemen must dig deep wells to provide water for their cattle. Very deep water table. There are some places in the world where the water table is very deep underground. Such places are deserts, great stretches of land where almost nothing can grow but prickly plants. The underground water in a desert is so deep down that it cannot soak up high enough to moisten the soil or the roots of the plants. An oasis. Even in a desert, there are places where the water table comes close to the surface. Such a place is called an oasis. You've probably seen pictures of a desert oasis. This is a place where there is a layer of hard, porous rock under the sand. This hard layer keeps the water table close enough to the surface to be reached easily by digging a well. Sometimes, when the water table is high enough, the water actually bubbles out of the sand in the form of a spring. Around these springs, the ground is moist. Trees and green things can grow there. In desert regions, you will find villages located near an oasis because people were able to find water there. Palms and soft green things on the surface show that water could be found below. Where there is water, people can live and also take care of passing camel caravans. Underground lakes and rivers. In some places where the rock layers are soft and the rainfall is heavy, the rapidly flowing and seeping water sometimes wears down the softer rock and carries bits of it away. In this way, the water carves out hollow caves that become underground lakes and long channels that become underground rivers. Travelers come from far away to see the Mammoth Caves, Carlsbad Caves, Ruby Falls, and other such lakes and rivers, where they can get a glimpse of the vast underground waterways of the world. Sometimes an underground stream will flow out of the rocks and join a surface river. Together, the over and underground rivers will then flow along on their way to the sea. A rock sandwich. Sometimes the underground stream flows through a curious arrangement of rocks that might be called a rock sandwich. Think of a sandwich lying on the table with one end of the sandwich a little higher than the other. Now think of the rock sandwich as being made of non-porous rock, not very tasty, of course, and the filling of sand or porous rock. If you poured water into the sand or porous material at the higher end, it would seep down and flow out of the lower end. But you would not see any water anywhere else along the sandwich because the two layers of hard, non-porous rock would keep it from coming through. Such rock sandwiches occur in many places in the world, and in some of them, the water flows through non-porous layers for miles without showing above the ground. When people need a well in a place of this kind, they must dig and drill through the top layer of hard rock to hit the water in the sandwich. Of course, special machinery is needed to go through this rock, and there are drills and hammers and strong pipes for the job. A man may drill such a well in Kansas and get drinking water from rain that fell on the Rocky Mountains 1,000 miles away. In the Midwest, there are more than 15,000 rock sandwich wells. An artesian well. Sometimes when a well is drilled, a lucky thing happens. The water spurts up out of the hole in a fountain. This happens when the hole happens to be drilled at the bottom of a V-shaped sandwich. In such a place, the water can be piped right up into the house without having to be pumped up, because the water from the high end of the sandwich helps to push the water up. This kind of well is called an artesian well. You may hear people call any deep drilled well an artesian well, but only one where the water flows up without pumping is a true artesian well. Out of an artesian well, deep drilled wells, out of bubbling springs and plain dug wells, most of the people in the world get their water, all from the underground water table. You and the water table. All over the world, the sweet, clean rain pours down from the clouds onto the land. It seems to sink into the deep earth and be lost to us, but it is not gone. It seeps beneath the sand and soil and porous rock until it reaches the hard, non-porous rock layer. On this hard rock bed, the underground water flows along. In some places, the non-porous rock is deep, deep underground, so that the rainwater sinks hundreds of feet before it reaches its bed of rock. In other places, where the hard, non-porous rock is close to the surface, the water table is close to the earth's surface too. Everywhere in the world, wherever you walk, there is water flowing beneath you on its secret way to the sea. You can't see the underground water as it seeps slowly down through porous rock and soil, or flows rapidly through underground lakes and rivers to the sea. But when you look at the surface of the earth, you can read some of the story of the hidden water underneath. But whether it is high, near the surface, under the rich green fields, or deep down, low, under the dry golden desert, everywhere underground, water is flowing on its hard rock bed. And all the water comes from the rains and the snow. It falls on mountains and pours off into rivers that speed to the sea. And it beats on the level land and the porous places of the earth and seeps into the underground water system that also flows to the sea.